Up next, Necrolord DK. I'm going to put this one in A. Necrolord DK is powerful. It is thematic with the Death Knight, doing a lot of death grips. Death grips is the best part about Death Knight. Doing a lot of them is cool. And so yeah, I'm putting it in A. It's pretty simple, but simple isn't necessarily bad. It's just, it's a unique effect that is, powerful, thematic. Not much more you can ask for. Necrolord DH is up next. This is one of the effects that they had to change because it used to be really cringe. Now it's only moderately cringe. So I will put this one over in... people actually do play this a little bit in MDI in the right circumstances, but I'm going to put it in C. Very few people play Necro DH, and it's mostly tanks as well that consider it. Although you can play it as Havoc, but it's not a particularly fun ability or anything. I've still got an empty D tier. I wonder if I'm going to put anything in D tier, or if this is going to be another one of those videos where I just do a cop-out and don't put anything in the D tier. I probably should, but we'll see. Up next is Necrolord Druid, Adaptive Swarm. I actually think this works out pretty well for Druid. Again, Druid has 4 specs, so it's a really difficult challenge to design abilities that do interesting stuff for all of those. But I think the Necrolord Druid actually acquits itself fairly well. It's a swarm that increases your dots and hots to the target. And hey, it turns out all 4 Druid specs do dots and hots. And in fact, it has an interesting identity on stuff like Guardian, that Guardian does hots to itself. Not that often, but it can do some hots to itself, and it does dots to enemies. Resto Druid, of course, hotting your friends, dotting your enemies, so you can use this for damage or for helping your friends. And then, of course, the DPS effects of it. I would say it's least exciting for the 2 DPS specs, but for Guardian and for Resto, I actually think it does reasonably well. And I'm going to award some bonus points here because I think that Druid is playing from such a disadvantage with the 4 specs to create interesting effects for it. I'm going to put this thing in A. I think this is good enough for me to go up there in terms of my brain, does enough thinking about this effect that I'm going to put it there. I think it's cool. Necrolord Hunter is up next. Death Chakram. This effect has been just kind of comically bad since it's come out. They've buffed it basically every patch, and maybe in 9.1.5, that set of buffs that are coming to it will make it exciting to use Copium. Until then, though, I'm going to keep it in C tier. I'm not going to put something that has never been used above C tier. Necrolord Mage is up next. Necrolord Mage has to go in C tier as well. Nobody ever plays this. It is worth noting, when the Covenant abilities themselves were first spoiled, Necrolord Arcane Mage was the first thing that I was excited to play. But it was a casualty of the fact that they stuck with the bad Covenant design for more than a year in this expansion and didn't let you just swap and mess around with things. That I never actually have done that, really, besides leveling my mage through Maldraxxus, where I had a lot of fun with it, but couldn't justify staying that Covenant. So this is something where I will probably enjoy playing Necrolord Arcane Mage, have some fun with it in a future, patch at some point. But the way the Covenant system worked right now, an ability that niche could never be higher than C tier. So yeah, another one that's a winner of them finally making the game good. Necrolord Monk is up next. Necrolord Monk is the Bone Dust Brew effect. This is another one that has it has a lot of text on the ability. It is a lot. There are a lot of words on an effect that you press it and then you press Spinning Crane Kick over and over again until the effect expires. That's for sure. But I think this one also is reasonably good. The way that it works, again, Monk is one of the harder ones to design for because it's got a healing spec, a tank spec, and a damage spec. I don't think this does as well as Kyrian Monk in terms of being interesting on those, but I'm going to put it in the middle B tier. It's reasonably good. Necrolord Paladin is up next. Necrolord Paladin is the Conqueror's Hammer something. The effect that was never used, I believe it was buffed or even maybe reworked, and still has never been really used. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. I'm gonna put this thing down in D tier. Actually, I'm sure somebody has used Necrolord Paladin for something, but I've never seen it. I'm gonna put it there. This might be one of the ones where some PvPers, maybe again, this is entirely a PvE list, so maybe it's got some utility there or something. But Yeah. All right, Necrolord Priest is up next. Unholy Nova. Kind of a cool name and theme. Ultimately, for me though, I feel like this one is a pretty bland effect. I'm going to put it in B. B for bland. Necrolord Rogue is up next. This effect was broken beyond belief for Shadowlands Beta. Then they nerfed it to the point where it's not very good, but it turns out all the Rogue Covenant abilities aren't very good, so this one's actually fine. You play it as Outlaw and M+, because it Blade Flurries. It's an effect that actually does Blade Flurry, unlike the other Rogue Covenants, so it does AoE. Other than that, all the Rogue Covenant abilities are all single target for all the other specs. And yeah, Necrolord Rogue, it's a cool idea. You know, a bleed that lasts forever until the target dies. It refreshes on kills. I want to put this in A, although really only Outlaw is using it. I'm gonna put this in A. I think the idea is cool enough to just barely clear the bar and get into A for me. But it's close. It's close for sure. It definitely, like, it would be, there are some issues that need to be addressed with this ability, but thematically it vibes with me in a way that I'm gonna put it in A. I'm sure I've been inconsistent with some of the specs at the bottom of A and the top of B. Ultimately, like, I could go either way on a lot of them, but that's where I'm gonna put it. Decision made. Necrolord Shaman. All right, for me, this is another S tier. Primordial Wave is, I believe this is one of the most phenomenal Covenant abilities in terms of how interesting it is to play, how it behaves with different specs. All three specs it does something cool on. Enhancement is maybe a little bit lame, but for Elemental, being able, the way that this plays, where in AoE, you kind of are planning ahead, and then you press this button, and if you planned right, you're sending a lava burst then at like 5 targets. Very cool effect. I like that a lot, and I think this is I think that if all the Covenant abilities were like the Necrolord Shaman one, that would be my preferred. This is my preferred one. You know, the Night Fae Druid one is really cool, and it's earned an S tier for a lot of good reasons, but the Necrolord Shaman one is like, it's rotational in a way that the other ones aren't. You know, it's really does a great job. So yeah, that's my favorite. So if you're watching this tier list and Necrolord Shaman is something you played and didn't enjoy, we're just not going to worry about much with what Covenant abilities should look like and which ones are fun. Necrolord Warlock is up next. Decimating Bolt. In theory, not a bad choice for Demonology. In practice, not a choice for anybody. Necrolord Warrior is up next. That is the Conqueror's Banner, which gives me some mastery and gives two of my friends some mastery as well when I press it. So I'm choosing between B and C here for Necrolord Warrior. I think I'm going to come down on B. You know, it does buff you as well. I think support effects on non-healers are more interesting to me as well when they're used sparingly, especially like the way that Warrior works, especially once we get Covenant swaps, being able to choose between a supporting effect and the damaging effects, which it has good options for as well, I think is pretty cool. And so, much as I generally would dislike support effects, I dislike them more when they're kind of just the healers are forced to do them. And so when DPS and tanks have these sorts of powerful things, I think that can be... I would still rather the game didn't have button you press that makes somebody else does more damage. I think I would have more fun if those were just gone entirely, but if they have to exist, I would rather them be on DPS than anybody else, I think. Venthyr Death Knight, as we begin the final Covenant here. Venthyr Death Knight Swarming Mist actually is a pretty fun button to press. It gives you resource as well. I'm going to put it at the high end of B. It's hard for me to put this thing in A because it is so, similar to just press button, does damage. You know what? It's pretty sweet, though, with, like, Breath of Sindragosa. It does feel good to play. All right, this one I'm going to put in A. This is a feel A. And it's interesting enough as well for, like, Frost with Breath for me to put it up here, but I'm not going above A. It's close, right? It's like a idea B, and this tier list has been mostly put a lot of weight towards how good the idea is, but it feels good enough to play that I'm going to put it in. I'm going to put it in A. Venthyr Demon Hunter's up next, Sinful Brand. This is you press the button to apply it to targets, and then also it applies to everything when you press meta. Meta is a really thematic part of the Demon Hunter experience, pressing meta, especially for Havoc that does the meta leap part as well. So a Covenant ability that it triggers when you do that, and does like AoE damage when you do that, and otherwise it's like a single target button. I think that's cool enough to go high B for me, but I'm not going to put this one up in A. But I think it is a cool effect. Venthyr Druid is up next, Ravenous Frenzy. Ravenous Frenzy is another one where this button is a lot of fun to press and a lot of fun to use, especially once we move to a world where you can opt in to using it in some situations and not be forced to have this button on your bars on fights where you'd rather not have it. I think it's going to be pretty good. It doesn't do anything really druidy, but, you know, spam button faster. You better spam button faster or else you're getting stunned. That's kind of fun. This is another one where, like, the play is better than the idea. I'd put it in B, though. I'm not putting Venthyr Minkins above B. I hate them so much. Venthyr Hunter is up next, Flayed Shot. This has been one that has been seen some play in PvP, I believe, but I'm not rating on that. In PvE, there was speculation about this tier. I think this is an effect where in a world of, if free Covenant swaps had existed this tier, people would have experimented with it, maybe on some fights. In practice, I really haven't seen basically anybody use this in PvE stuff. I mean, my C and D tiers, this should really just be one. You know what? We're making an executive decision here. This tier is just, there's not really a meaningful difference. So we'll just call it a C and not have a D tier anymore. Venti Mage is up next, Mirrors of Torment. This one tries to do something cool for each spec, and I don't think it does a really great job of doing something cool for each spec. I'm going to put it somewhere in the B tier. It's like okay, but it gives you like, oh, this thing gives you clear casting as Arcane or Brain Freeze as Frost. And it can be kind of fun, particularly as Frost, for whom the only Covenant or the only spec it's really that good for. Although it's actually not bad for. It's not bad if you have to play it for the others either, but that's the one where you're actually really excited to be Venthyr single target. It's kind of cool. It does affect your rotation a little bit, but to me it feels kind of clunky. It's hard to describe exactly why, but I've done my best. Venthyr Monk is up next. This is another effect that they're looking to change in 9.1.5 to change how it operates. This is the one where it's like Fallen Order. You spawn acolytes of the different monk types, the different, monk aspects, whatever those things are. This has actually seen a little bit of play recently for Mistweaver. Other than that, it's never been particularly compelling or close to being good for Brew or Windwalker. I'm going to put it at the low end of B tier. I think when Mistweavers get something that they have fun while playing, that's cool. That's good enough to bring it into B for me, but... Venthyr Paladin is up next. This is a polarizing effect. It is clearly very strong. I believe it is strong enough to the point that it is overpowered and... like things being Covenant abilities that are like a little too strong, too strong that you have for an expansion can be really good. This one goes too far, I think. It's also pretty clunky. It just does so much damage though that you have to play it. It warps the raid metagame in a way that was already warped towards Holy Paladin and Disc Priest, even further towards Holy Paladin. And in Mythic Plus, you use it for high-end pushing, but you'd rather be playing Kyrian because Kyrian's way more fun. I'm going to put this one in C tier out of protest. I think that this was probably the biggest mistake to create in the way that it was. There's some really cool stuff going on here that, like, idea-wise is cool. Making a 4-minute cooldown Covenant ability that's a really powerful cooldown while it's rolling, I think is an interesting angle. I think just designing it the way it was, giving it to Paladins in particular... with Holy Paladin being in that class, not, nerfing it by, they came and they hit it with like a little 5% nerf, and unsurprisingly, it's still the best, and I'm sure that it's going to get nerfed by 5% again, and if you nerf this thing by 5% like 20 times, it would probably be fine, but these little nerfs to it, it's just been too warping and too negative to the metagame from my perspective. I'm going to put this thing in C for those reasons. Of course, it is very different than a lot of the other effects in C tier, but I do think that, if I had the power to force a redesign of one Covenant ability, it would be the Venthyr Paladin one. So I'm going to put it in the bottom of C tier. Venthyr Priest is up next. Mind Games. Mind Games is really exciting for PvP. I said I wasn't going to rate on PvP, of course, but the effect that it has there, I think it is cool for PvPers that they get that. For PvP, I imagine this probably goes up in A or S in terms of how fun it is to play. To keep it consistent, though, I will not rate based off of that. And it just is a middlingly interesting one then for priests in the B tier. It does have a kind of cool theoretical effect where you use it on a boss before it does like an AoE effect, and that AoE is effectively a damage reduction on that AoE effect, which is kind of cool, kind of nifty, but its PvE effects aren't enough to bring it above B tier. A holistic version of this list that analyzed how things did for PvP would certainly have Venthyr Priest higher, but I don't want to do that for that spec because I don't know what it would do to a lot of the other Covenant abilities, so I've not done it that way. Venthyr Rogue is up next. Flagellation. Flagellation does a lot of damage. It does sort of change how you play a little bit, but not enough for me to go above B on it. Venthyr Shaman. So Chain Harvest, I actually like Chain Harvest a lot. Chain Harvest is another one where it's simple, but I feel like it does such a good job of incorporating that shaman identity and working well. For a class with 3 specs as different as Enhancement, Elemental, and Restoration are from each other, the fact that they found, like, hey, this is the class that has Chain Heal and Chain Lightning, so why don't we just make a Covenant ability that's, like, massive both? I think that's cool enough. I'm going to put this thing in A. I think it does a good job. And I think that, it's part of a balanced Covenant ability breakfast, right? Not all Covenant abilities should be as simple as it. It does very much fit into that sort of, like, a lot of the things I put in B tier, I said I wasn't going to put them higher because they were just, damage button you press on cooldown. But I feel like it's enough of a, like, when you read this, you're like, I get why that's a shaman effect. This is a callback to these iconic shaman abilities, and yeah, I like it. It's good. Venthyr Warlock is up next. I've played more Venthyr Warlock than 99.99% of the population because I played it for a couple hours. But I'm not going to put Venthyr Warlock above C, much as I'd like to. It's a kind of cool idea. It's a beautiful visual as well. You lob this, like, big red black hole, effect at these targets. It's a little bit clunky with how it's coded. Sometimes you feel like it should hit things that it doesn't actually hit, which can be very frustrating when playing it, and also it just doesn't do very much damage. On single target, it's, like, not worth pressing this button for, I think, 2 of the 3 specs. But it does some cool stuff. When it hits the target, it applies a curse to everything that it hits, which is kind of nifty, kind of warlocky. I'm not going to go above C because they just made it do so little damage, but I wish I could. And this is definitely another one of the ones where, like, if they made this a button that was worth pressing, it looks so good. This is potentially one where just on how good the animation is, it could go up if it just did a little more damn. And finally, much as appropriate to the effect, this could have been either the first ability we reviewed or the last one. It is Condemn for Venthyr Warrior, which I like the way they designed this a lot. So this replaces Execute, and it's a better Execute that also works on high health targets. I like the idea of a Covenant ability that just replaces one of your class abilities with an empowered version. I wish they had messed around more with this sort of idea. I think that's innovative. I definitely prefer it to the 30 different effects we got that were just, this is a 2-minute cooldown that you press every 2 minutes, and it does a lot of damage. I think that, I'm going to put Venthyr Warrior 1 up in A as well. I think that's interesting enough. The design is cool. It's powerful. It's not currently being used, but it was last tier, and it certainly could be again next tier. And it, obviously Execute, one of the most iconic warrior abilities, something that goes in and is, turbo Execute with a slightly different identity that warriors have for this expansion. seems good for me. Warrior is one of the coolest ones because the 4 Warrior Covenants are all good, but they're all so different. They all do such different things. So I think on balance, when we move to this world of Covenant swapping, Warriors are going to be having such a good time being able to swap between all 4 cool and different Covenants. But that is my list. This is my full list now of all the Covenant abilities. I imagine this has been split into 2 videos. This is the end of part 2. Hope you enjoyed both parts. Let me know what you think. I'll put the link to this Shadowlands Covenant abilities thing into the description below. Shout out to BeerShake74 on Twitter who created this little template on the Tier Maker website. And yeah, there's my verdict. Necrolord, Shaman, and Nightfey Druid are my all-star picks for premium Covenant abilities. And then all these ones up in A I think are pretty darn cool too. Yeah, hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.